Women systematically underestimate their own abilities. If you test men and women and you ask them questions on totally objective criteria, like GPAs, men get it wrong slightly high, and women get it wrong slightly low. Women do not negotiate for themselves in the workforce. A study in the last 2 years of people entering the workforce out of college showed that 57% of boys entering, or men, I guess, are negotiating for salary, and only 7% of women. And most importantly, men attribute their success to themselves and women attribute it to other external factors. If you ask men why they did a good job, they'll say, "I'm awesome." If you ask, obviously, "Why are you even asking?" If you ask women why they did a good job, what they'll say is someone helped them, they got lucky, they worked really hard. Why does this matter? Boy, it matters a lot. Because no one gets to the corner office by sitting on the side, not at the table, and no one gets the promotion if they don't think they deserve their success, or they don't even understand their own success.
But I think, just to put it in a nutshell, that many basic social values are passed on unconsciously already in babyhood. Adults convey a great deal to babies about the kind of society they're living in. At the most basic level, for example, whether their world is supportive and safe or challenging and dangerous. And all of us, in different ways, are working with the unloving side of society, in a way, and trying to find ways to offer a more caring response. And particularly those people who are working in Africa are often doing really cutting-edge work in dealing with traumatic social problems, such as the AIDS epidemic, the aftermath of war, homelessness, and so on. Whilst probably the majority of you who've actually made it here today are pouring your creative energy into, I'm sure, wonderful but probably more tried and tested kind of projects.
Year 1781 Los Angeles is established and named Pablo de la Renta de Los Angeles by 44 families from Mexico as a fort for soldiers. More than 65 years later, the discovery of gold and silver metal draws settlers from across the country to Northern California. After the rush for gold dies down, Americans had flocked to Northern California for a fortune begin to disperse and settle parts of Southern California. By 1870, the small towns of Los Angeles have gained more than 5,600 residents, which multiplies nearly 20 times by the turn of the century. The rapidly increasing population puts additional strain on the Los Angeles River, the city's main source of water, which has not been helped by a recent 2 years of drought. In order to avoid tragedy, a new water source has to be found. The city of Los Angeles as a development as an urban center and growing thirst for water facilitated the triumph of the creation of the Los Angeles Aqueduct, but simultaneously led to the tragedies of the St. Francis Dam and the draining of important landmarks like Mono Lake and Owen Zone. The year 1900, the city of Los Angeles is growing faster than its water resources. A need for the city is as clear as the water they need. In 1902, Irish-American civil engineer William Holland was named superintendent of the Los Angeles Water Department. Soon after, the department began considering options to quench the city of Los Angeles's growing thirst. They eventually settled on a lake in the vastly agricultural Owens Valley. The Owens Lake was more than enough to support its inhabitants, as it was once up to 12 miles long and 8 miles wide. These two factors made Owens Valley the perfect candidate to supply Los Angeles with the water it needed to expand. If you look at the recent research conducted on human behavior, you will be surprised about the findings. It is said that there is a correlation between human behavior and our physical feature. It was believed that genes are the only factor that determine the physical appearance. This includes height and hair color. However, the recent study showed that behavior is also another factor that can change height and hair color. The findings in the study further state that a person's habits can change the physical features of human. These findings have a tremendous impact on scientific fields such as biology, psychology, sociology and neuroscience.
The Travels of Sir John Mandeville first saw the light of day in the mid-13th century, and states in the introduction that it's intended as a guidebook for pilgrims venturing to the Holy Land. Unfortunately, most of the guidebook information is wildly out of date. The Travels of John Mandeville, despite posing as a guidebook, is actually just a sort of combination of many 11th and 12th century sources. Mandeville ripped pieces from one source, bits from another, and put them together in a big melting pot in one continuous narrative. A storyteller at heart, Mandeville quickly leaves the guidebook behind and starts spinning tales. Now, based on events described within the Travels of John Mandeville, we can say fairly definitively that it was written after 1360, which would seem to jive with the 1366 date that Mandeville gives for when he finished his narrative. Now, while there is no original manuscript known to survive, we do have a very early copy, from 1371. It was written in French, although it's heavily peppered with Anglicanisms, suggesting that the book was written in English initially and later translated into French. A 15th century copy of the work says that it was originally written in Latin, translated into French, and then translated into English that it might reach men of all parts of the world, but this seems to be a much later addition. The work was quickly translated into all the dialects and languages of Europe: French, Spanish, Dutch, German, Bohemian, even Gaelic. We have 3 early English manuscripts, although they're all post-1400. But to give something of an indication of how popular Mandeville's work was, we do have over 300 surviving manuscript versions of the Travels of John Mandeville, as opposed to only 77 of Marco Polo. Now, all of this is in an age pre-Gutenberg, so that should give you some sort of indication of just exactly how much this work spread.
Today the drilling rigs are operating in water that's 3 or 4 kilometers deep. Tomorrow they could go deeper still. But at some stage global production of oil will peak and begin a remorseless decline. The question is, how soon? I'm sure that we're talking here, decades. So, we're not hitting peak in 2010? We don't believe we are even in 2030. The worst case is that it's occurring now or very soon because the world is unprepared. It's absolutely unprepared. There are no quick fixes in something like this. Is a world addicted to cheap liquid energy facing the beginning of the end of the age of oil? In the ever-spreading suburbs of Australia's great cities where mortgages are high and private transport indispensable, everyone's feeling the pinch.
I wrote a letter last week talking about the work at the foundation, sharing some of the problems, and Warren Buffett had recommended I do that, being honest about what was going well, what wasn't, and making it kind of an annual thing. A goal I had there was to draw more people in to work on those problems, because I think there are some very important problems that don't get worked on naturally. That is, the market does not drive the scientists, the communicators, the thinkers, the governments to do the right things. And only by paying attention to these things and having brilliant people who care and draw other people in can we make as much progress as we need to. So this morning I'm going to share two of these problems and talk about where they stand. But before I dive into those, I want to admit that I am an optimist. Any tough problem, I think it can be solved. And part of the reason I feel that way is looking at the past. Over the last century, average lifespan has more than doubled. Another statistic, perhaps my favorite, is to look at childhood deaths. As recently as 1960, 110 million children were born, and 20 million of those died before the age of 5. 5 years ago, 135 million children were born, so more, and less than 10 million of them died before the age of 5. So that's a factor of 2 reduction in the childhood death rate. It's a phenomenal thing. I mean, each one of those lives matters a lot.
Look at the recent Most Respected Companies survey by the Financial Times. Who are the most respected companies and business leaders at the current time? Rather predictably, they are Jack Welch and General Electric, and Bill Gates and Microsoft. Neither has achieved their world-class status through playing nice. Welch is still remembered for the brutal downsizing he led his business through, and for the environmental pollution incidents and prosecutions. Microsoft has had one of the highest profile cases of bullying market dominance of recent times, and Gates has been able to achieve the financial status where he can choose to give lots of money away by being ruthless in business. Well, I think the drugs we use are not taken seriously into account. Parents leave their drugs all over the place at home, but their children may accidentally take these drugs before they know it. And soon many children are victim to accidents. Now, this must be avoided at all cost. One way of preventing accidents is to put drugs in closed boxes. Also, parents can firmly close the lid really well. I am sure kids would not be able to reach it. Another problem we find in mismanagement of drugs is how these medicines can be allergic to many people. We have to remember different drugs have different resistance and duration. That is extremely dangerous if someone takes a wrong drug. So what are the ways we can stop this from happening? Well, I suggest we introduce the course, which will primarily improve the misuse of drugs and greatly improve our EVEs.